The storm had passed by morning, but its wreckage still clung to the edges of Maple Hill, where fallen branches littered the streets and the air still smelled of wet asphalt and pine. Officer Daniel Reyes had just finished his overnight shift and was heading back to the station when something caught his eye in the rear-view mirror. A movement near the tree line, quick but unmistakable. He slowed the patrol car and reversed carefully, scanning the roadside. There, half submerged in a muddy ditch and barely distinguishable from the debris, was a large German shepherd, soaked, shivering, with ribs showing beneath his matted coat and eyes that held more fear than life. Reyes parked and approached slowly, one hand out, the other ready to call for animal control. But the dog didn't growl, didn't run, just lifted his head an inch and made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a sigh, like the breath of something too tired to be afraid anymore. Without a word, Reyes took off his uniform jacket and wrapped it around the trembling dog, whispering, "You're okay now, partner. You're safe." He didn't know then why he said partner. Maybe instinct, maybe hope. The vet said the shepherd was dehydrated, underfed, and had likely been wandering for weeks, abandoned perhaps or lost. Reyes paid the bill himself and took him home, naming him Echo because the dog didn't bark, only watched, followed, and listened. Echo didn't sleep much at first. He flinched at sudden sounds and refused to enter any room unless Reyes went first. But day by day, things changed. Reyes began leaving the back door open during his morning workouts, and one day, Echo stepped outside and lay beside him in the grass. Another time, during a nightmare Reyes hadn't had in years, left over from a bad case and a worse loss, Echo nudged the door open and rested his head on Reyes's chest until his breathing calmed. Slowly, loyalty replaced fear. Then came the day during a community event at the park, when Reyes was chatting with a few local kids near the food stands, and a loud pop, just a tire bursting, sent the crowd into a brief panic. Echo, who had been quietly lying nearby, leapt forward and positioned himself between Reyes and the noise, head low, body ready, eyes scanning. It wasn't just instinct. It was devotion. From that day on, no one questioned where Echo belonged. The department even issued him a special tag, Honorary Canine, Echo Reyes. Though he never officially trained, Echo joined Reyes on his quiet patrols through the neighborhood, sitting calmly in the front seat, ears perked. He never needed a leash, just a glance. At night, he would lie on the porch, watching the street, tail flicking gently when Reyes returned home. And when people asked why a tough, by-the-book officer had taken in a damaged dog with no past, Reyes would shrug and say, "I didn't save him. He saved something in me I didn't know was still broken." Echo didn't need to be fierce or loud to protect. His presence was enough. Steady, quiet, loyal. A dog once discarded by the world, now the silent guardian of one man's peace. It had been almost a year since Echo was found on the side of that road, and in that time, the bond between him and Officer Daniel Reyes had deepened into something beyond explanation. Closer than partners, quieter than friendship, stronger than words. Echo didn't speak, but he understood things most people missed. He could read a room before Daniel walked into it. He knew the difference between tired and broken. He knew when Daniel needed silence and when he needed a nudge. And more than anything, he knew his job. Not the kind printed on badges or stitched into uniforms, but the unshakable role he had claimed, guardian. Daniel had stopped thinking of Echo as a rescue a long time ago. He was family now. But the day that truly defined what they meant to each other started like any other Tuesday. Gray skies, light rain, the hum of the morning patrol shift, Reyes pulled into the small rural community near Pine Brook, where he'd been checking on an elderly resident named Mrs. Callahan, who lived alone in a weather-worn cottage surrounded by tall grass and rusted wind chimes. She hadn't answered her phone in 2 days, and neighbors were growing worried. Reyes knew she was forgetful, but fiercely independent, someone who wouldn't ask for help until it was too late. As he stepped out of the car, Echo followed without a command, staying close, ears high, body relaxed but alert. They knocked. No answer. Reyes circled the house, while Echo paused at the porch, nose lifted slightly, tail still. Something was off. Echo didn't bark. He never did, but he gave a low, barely audible whine and pressed his head gently to the door. Reyes knocked again, louder this time, then called through the crack in the wood. "Mrs. Callahan, it's Officer Reyes. Are you home?" A few seconds passed. Nothing. Then, a sound. Faint. Like metal scraping across tile. Echo moved fast, running to the back window and whining. Again, pawing at the frame. Reyes knew that sound, a call for help. Without hesitation, he radioed dispatch and broke the side window to gain entry. What he found made his heart stop. Mrs. Callahan was collapsed on the kitchen floor, one hand outstretched toward her phone, the kettle still whistling behind her. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow. Reyes rushed to her side, but it was Echo who did the most important thing. He lay down beside her, placing his head gently near hers, his calm presence slowing the panic that had started to rise in her fragile chest. Paramedics arrived within minutes, thanks to the quick call, and while they worked, Echo never moved. He stayed, silent and still, the quiet protector holding space where fear had lived a moment ago. After she was stabilized and taken to the hospital, Reyes sat on the porch steps with Echo beside him, rain falling in a steady drizzle. He looked at his dog, the one he'd found in a ditch a year ago, the one who had once been too afraid to sleep indoors. "You saved her, buddy," he whispered, scratching behind Echo's ears. "You knew before I did." Echo simply leaned against him, the way he always did, his only answer the steady rhythm of trust. A few days later, Mrs. Callahan's daughter came to the station with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice. "They said if she'd been found even an hour later, she wouldn't have made it," she told Reyes. "Your dog, Echo, he's a hero." Reyes shook his head gently. "He's family," he replied, "and family doesn't need medals, just purpose." After that, something changed in the town. People stopped calling him just Officer Reyes. Now it was Reyes and Echo. Children would run to pet him during school visits. Older folks left bones wrapped in napkins on the station steps. Even tough officers who never cried found themselves reaching for Echo after long shifts. The chief eventually had a plaque made. Echo, not officially trained, but truly meant to serve. It hung just outside the briefing room, right beside the list of officers lost in the line of duty. Echo wasn't just a rescue anymore. He was a protector, a comforter, a living reminder that sometimes the most broken things find the strongest reasons to stay. At night, long after the world had gone quiet, and Reyes sat with a book by the window, Echo would lie nearby, watching shadows pass across the floor, always between the door and his human. And Reyes knew, no matter what storms came, no matter what was waiting outside tomorrow, he had something he could trust without question. Not just a dog, a soul who had chosen him and never stopped choosing him. It had been nearly 2 years since Echo first stepped into Officer Reyes's life, and in that time, the silent bond between man and dog had become something of legend in Pine Brook. Not in a flashy way, not with newspaper headlines or TV segments, but in quiet, unforgettable moments, like the way Echo would sit calmly beside a grieving widow at a traffic stop, resting his head on her lap without command, or how his very presence could settle an anxious teenager caught in a spiral of fear and silence. Reyes had never believed in therapy animals before Echo, but now he understood something deeper. Sometimes healing doesn't come from words, but from being seen and accepted in your rawest, most vulnerable form. Echo never judged. He just listened. One morning, Reyes was assigned to a new program the department had begun piloting, a youth outreach patrol meant to build trust between officers and at-risk kids in the community. Reyes wasn't excited about it. Paperwork, tense parents, guarded teenagers. But Echo, as always, sat patiently beside him as they pulled into the school parking lot for the first visit. That's when Reyes met Jacob, 11 years old, quiet, foster care, a file full of red flags, truancy, aggression, sudden outbursts. But nothing in his eyes matched the words on that paper. When Reyes greeted the classroom, most kids responded with curiosity or boredom. But Jacob didn't look at Reyes. He looked at Echo. Something about the dog, the stillness, the watchfulness, made the boy lean forward just a little. Reyes noticed. When the class ended, Jacob hung back, lingering near the desk as if trying to pretend he wasn't waiting for something. Reyes approached slowly. "You like dogs?" he asked. Jacob shrugged. "We had one. Before." Reyes didn't press. He just sat on the floor beside Echo, who leaned gently into his officer's shoulder. "This is Echo. He's not trained the way most dogs are, but he knows things. He knows how to wait." That was all it took. Jacob sat. Didn't speak, just sat beside Echo and laid a hand on his back. They stayed like that for 10 minutes. No one said a word. That visit turned into 2, then 4. Then every Tuesday, Jacob would meet Echo at the front door, already waiting before Reyes even parked. Teachers began to comment on the change, not just in Jacob's mood, but in how he started opening up, in small ways. One day, he even laughed. It was Echo's tail, sweeping comically fast in excitement when Jacob arrived. That did it. A small sound, barely more than a giggle. But to Reyes, it was thunder. Over time, Echo became the bridge. Jacob started coming by the station once a week, doing small tasks like cleaning the cruiser, helping stock snacks for community outreach. Echo would sit beside him like a quiet coach, tail thumping when the boy finished a job. He wasn't just petting a dog. He was learning to trust again, learning what safe felt like. And one afternoon, when Reyes dropped Jacob off at his foster home, the boy turned suddenly at the door and said, "Echo's not just yours, right? He can be mine, too?" Reyes nodded, the words catching in his throat. "He already is, kid." Later that night, as they sat on the porch watching the last amber light dip behind the hills, Reyes looked down at the dog resting quietly at his side. "You're more than a rescue," he whispered. "You're the reason some people start again." Echo didn't move, didn't react. He just stayed exactly where he belonged. Between yesterday's scars and tomorrow's hope, a silent guardian who had once been lost and now made sure no one else stayed that way for long. The summer heat rolled slowly into Pine Brook, softening the edges of the days with golden light and long evenings. And by now, it had become routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Jacob would sit on the front step of the community center, backpack slouched against the wall, a sandwich wrapped in foil in one hand, and a nervous hope in his eyes. And always, just as the clock touched 3:45, the familiar black and white cruiser would ease to a stop, The passenger window rolled halfway down, and Echo's head would poke out, tongue lolling, tail thumping once like a promise. Jacob would grin, a real one, not the half-curled ones he used to wear like armor, and run to meet them, climbing in without needing to ask permission anymore. In those moments, there were no case files, no missed school days, just one boy, one dog, and one man learning how to become someone's safe place again. Officer Reyes didn't talk much about his own past, but Jacob didn't need words. He saw it in the way Reyes sat with silence, not afraid of it, in the way he let Echo lead sometimes, trusting instincts more than rules, in the way his voice always softened when he spoke to the dog, as if Echo were the only one who had ever truly heard him. That summer became something sacred, the three of them taking slow drives through pine forests, visiting quiet farms where Echo could run free, or stopping by the shelter where Reyes still volunteered once a month. Echo never strayed far, always circling back to them, always watching. One afternoon, as the wind shifted and clouds gathered low, Jacob grew quieter than usual. They had just returned from a visit to the lake, where Echo had barked, an actual bark, rare and gleeful, at a floating stick Jacob had thrown too far. But now, sitting in the quiet of the cruiser, the boy's shoulders had curled inward again. Reyes watched in the rearview mirror, his hand resting on the gear shift without moving. "Something on your mind?" he asked gently. Jacob didn't look up. "My mom used to tell me dogs could tell when you were sad. That's why our old dog, Leo, used to lie on my chest whenever I cried. He wasn't trained or anything. He just knew." Echo, as if summoned, leaned across the seat, nudging Jacob's hand with his muzzle. Jacob smiled faintly, eyes wet but unblinking. "When she died, Leo ran away. We never found him. I thought maybe he was trying to follow her." Reyes didn't speak at first. He didn't have answers, just understanding, the kind that comes from losing someone and surviving it alone. "Sometimes dogs carry the part of us that's too heavy to say out loud," he said softly. "Maybe Leo carried hers." Jacob nodded. "Echo doesn't try to fix me. He just stays. And it helps." The car stayed still for a while. Rain tapped lightly on the windshield. Echo rested his head on Jacob's knee. A week later, Reyes got a call that changed everything. Jacob's foster family was relocating, across the state. New job, better opportunity, they said. "We'd like to adopt him fully, give him a new start," the caseworker told him. Reyes felt his stomach twist, not with anger, but with the kind of ache that happens when something right is being pulled away before it's finished growing. He didn't tell Jacob immediately. Instead, he asked for one more day together. One more Echo ride. They went back to the lake. Jacob threw a stick farther than he ever had before, and Echo chased it full sprint, splashing, slipping, coming back soaked and proud. They laughed, both of them. That kind of laugh that breaks something open inside you. When they sat under the trees afterward, Reyes finally told him. Jacob didn't cry. Not at first. He just kept his hand on Echo's back and asked, "Can I say goodbye here?" Reyes nodded. The next morning, as the foster family packed their car, Echo did something he never did. He sat at the door, refusing to move, ears back, gaze locked on the street. When Jacob came out, suitcase in hand, Echo whined, just once, and padded over, sitting right at the boy's feet. Jacob knelt, pressing his forehead to Echo's. "Thank you," he whispered, "for staying, for listening." Reyes watched from the porch, arms folded tight against the weight of it all. The family pulled away slowly. Echo sat in the driveway until the car disappeared from view. That night, Reyes poured 2 cups of water, one for himself, one for Echo, and sat quietly by the back door, the crickets humming low. "You're more than a partner," he murmured. "You're what brings people back to life." Echo didn't move, just stayed, as always, watching the horizon like he knew. Even when the boy left, a part of him stayed. And when he came back, and Reyes knew he would, Echo would be waiting, loyal, still, and ready.